Welcome, tennis fans, to a special gear edition of Changeover Chat in the TennisONE app. I'm Randy Master, and today we welcome to the show the marketing manager of Wilson Global Racket Sports, Patrick Kuhle. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Really excited to be here.
Well, I think everybody in tennis is excited right now. You know, there have been so many iconic rackets and brands throughout the years in tennis, going back to Wood and even before that. I don't think there's any racket as well known and popular and revered as the Wilson Pro Staff, and it's been on the tip of a lot of people's tongues lately. And why don't you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, so we just released the newest Pro Staff, the 13th version. About a week ago, and it's going to be on sale globally on the 28th of September. But it's really exciting for us. Obviously, the Pro Staff racket is our most historic racket franchise. You know, it's been around for 37 years or so, give or take. So a long time. So a lot of people that have played with it. Obviously, a lot of legends in pro tennis that have played with it. So there's just a lot of excitement. And then obviously it's the racket that Roger Federer uses. So that certainly adds to it.
Right, and you told me you were in a big Zoom call, and Roger showed up, and Stefan Edberg, and that must have been fun. But how were those players? Obviously, I know Roger's involvement with Wilson and the Pro Staff, but somebody like Stefan Edberg, how is he still involved with your marketing efforts?
Yeah, so Stefan Edberg is still a part of the Wilson advisory staff, which is made up of everyone from tennis coaches to professional players like Roger Federer. And so Stefan's been on there since he was a player, and so he still is involved in tennis and still reps Wilson. So he, of course, is called upon anytime the new pro staffs are coming out, which is every couple of years, because he wrote so much history with the pro staff racket. So that's why we did a call with him and Roger the other day. Obviously, just two pro staff legends, and it's pretty fun. It's 4 a.m. for me, so it's interesting experience. But yeah, I'm happy to get up anytime to talk to those guys. So
yeah, and what a talent he was. One of the last just natural serve and volleyers, came in on everything. Just a beautiful game to watch. So this is the 13th version of the Pro Staff. Been around, as you said, 37 years, and there have been how many Grand Slam titles have been won by the Pro Staff? Well over 100.
Yeah, so our count is 117. So between singles, doubles, mixed, all of that, that's kind of where we're at. So I can't prove that it's the most Grand Slams of any tennis racket ever, but I'm thinking it's got to be. I mean, if you just think of the names between Sampras, Federer, Courier, Evert, Steffi Graf. I mean, there's so many legends. So yeah.
No, sure. And there are, and you named obviously the cream of the crop, but so many others have played with the racket throughout the years, and it's been a racket that's been very popular with juniors and college players as well. This has always been, the Pro Staff is what a lot of people would consider, and you guys would consider, kind of a player's stick. When you think Pro Staff and you think Roger and Edberg, that's what you think of, and it's kind of like, hey, don't use this at home. This is not for kind of the club player, but you guys have many versions of the Pro Staff that somebody that is a club player can go out there and use and love. Can you tell me a little bit about those models that aren't quite what Roger's swinging?
Yeah, so obviously we have the RF97 and the 97. Those are kind of the two hero models, we call them, but just the ones that people tend to think of when they think of Pro Staff. But we do have some lighter weight models because while everybody would love to use kind of the thin beam, small head size rackets, it's just not realistic. It's also, the Pro Staff is typically a pretty heavy racket. So, it might feel good for a couple games, but, once you get towards the end of the first set, you might start wearing down already. So, we make these lighter models, the 97L, which L stands for light, and then the 97 UL, which is ultralight. So they're lighter than the Hero models, but then they also have a little bit of a thicker beam. So I believe the 97 and the RF are like 21.5 millimeters, and the 97L and 97UL are 23. So they're just a little bit thicker to give those players a little more power.
Yeah. Well, I was reading some of the history of the pro staff. I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't know a whole lot about the composition of the pro staff. So it started with a graphite Kevlar composition, and that's kind of remained the composition over the years with some tweaks along the way.
Yeah, so the pro staff wasn't, the first graphite racket or anything. It wasn't even Wilson's first graphite racket. I think we were making rackets like the Sting and the Galaxy, and I think Edberg was playing with one called the Javelin, which kind of had the throat here, but then it had like this like A shape in the throat. It was kind of a goofy looking racket actually. So we were making some graphite rackets at the time, but then the pro staff was really the one that took off and kind of has, remained ever since. But what was different about it from the other rackets at the time is the Kevlar that we put in it. So it was like a Kevlar graphite double braid. So don't quote me on this, but I believe it was like a 50% Kevlar braid and 100% graphite everywhere else. Or, I'm not going to get super technical with it, but basically that provided some more stability to the racket that wasn't really around at the time. And so it was a really good feel for, power and control. And so we really kept to that. It actually had a, foam infusion as well. And so, we've kept to that, right? The RF97 is the most traditional feeling racket that you can get. Again, it still basically weighs the same as the original back from the early 80s. And it, has the Kevlar and the graphite, and then even the handle is like a traditional feeling handle versus some of the rounder handles that we use on our other rackets these days. And it still comes with a leather grip. So the RF is definitely the most traditional, but then, with the other models, we kind of innovate them to try to make them, for the modern game, right? We have the RF for people that want to, just keep reliving the glory days, right? But then the 97 and 97L and those other models, we kind of try to just make them better playing for today's style, right? And so that's kind of what's happened with the head size increases over the years and making them a little bit lighter than what they used to be. And now in the new one, we've even changed the handle to make it more of a round end cap. So
as we talk about kind of the makeup and how it's evolved over the years, we spoke recently, and you were talking about where the pro staff has been manufactured. It's moved from place to place domestically, and then it moved to an island in the Caribbean, and then I think it moved to Japan. Can you tell me a little bit about that in terms of why did the racket, and Wilson obviously said this, but that the racket changes a tiny bit, whether it's weather conditions or something, whatever, the air in the factory, or can you tell me a little bit about it? Just sounds, I can't really comprehend it, but it's something that Wilson has said. There's been this tiny little change.
Yeah, so the pro staff, when it first came out, was actually made in a factory in River Grove, Illinois, which is just outside of Chicago. And then I believe it was in 1987 or so that the manufacturing moved to this area called St. Vincent, which is in the Caribbean islands. And that name, pops up every now and again when talking about Pete Sampras's racket, because I believe he turned pro in '88. And so he was getting his rackets that were made in St. Vincent at the time. And so he just always wanted those rackets because then eventually we stopped making them in St. Vincent, and, the manufacturing moved over to Asia, which is where, all the racket manufacturers make their rackets these days. And, I think he was a little stubborn, and he only wanted his rackets to, come from the St. Vincent factory. But, making a tennis racket is just such a, it's so labor intensive, right? I mean, it's literally somebody is making it, and it's not like a, machine just cutting out rackets or anything like that. So it's literally people laying the strips of carbon. And so it is, very hard to get two rackets that are identical, right? I mean, that's what we pride ourselves on, is having this, trying to make the rackets exactly the same. But it is very difficult. And so that's kind of why, a million factors could play into how a racket, eventually turns out after it's baked, and that could come all the way down to the weather, like you mentioned. So it's interesting.
You have to think with Pete, it was probably more in his, in his head than it was the actual racket. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I guess in Andre Agassi was, a lot of players have had, quirks and kind of superstitions as it relates to the racket. I don't even think Andre would let the ball boy touch the racket. He would just like pull the bag off. But it's similar to, and his rival Pete, who knows where that comes from. But
as tennis players, we know how mental that game is. So it literally, the guys at the highest level, they take every single thing as serious as possible, right? And you can't fault them. And so, hey, when somebody like Pete Sampras is saying he only wants his rackets from a certain factory, well, the guy won 14 Grand Slams. So, he's obviously doing, something right. And everybody's got superstitions, and, everybody, or at least at that level, they take everything as serious as possible. So, yeah, it might look a little crazy to somebody on the outside, right? But if it's going to help them feel as good as they can when they're on the court, then that's what they're going to do. So.
Well, when we talk about all these iconic players that have played with the pro staff, I know you have a number of players on tour now that play the pro staff. Who are really your primary ambassadors of this racket right now?
Yeah, so Roger Federer is for sure the number one, right? He actually played with the original pro staff that Sampras was using when he first turned pro. And, he's switched it a little bit over the years. He started with an 85 square inch, and then he went to a 90 square inch. And then back in 2014, he went to the 97 square inch. And so he's definitely our biggest ambassador. He's won every Grand Slam with pro staff. So that's a great story for us. But then we have other players like, Petra Kvitova, who, has won a couple slams. She plays with pro staff. Grigor Dimitrov, who's, usually in the top 10. He's another guy that uses the racket. And then we have some young guys, that are, great players, and they're on the up and up. And that's, Kyle Edmonds and Riley Opelka are two guys that are, younger compared to, maybe somebody like Federer, but, they're very much having great results. So.
As far as when you go back to Roger, I remember when he finally made that switch. He was at a 90 square inch head, and then he went up to 95 or 97.
97. Yeah.
Okay. And it was something that, because it was Roger, everybody was talking about it, because he was always so stubborn with his rackets. And who knows if this is true, but you would hear some of the TV commentators say, why doesn't he, go to a larger head size? And he ultimately did. What do you think Roger gets out of that, out of that new head size that he didn't get before?
Yeah, so, he switched to it in 2014, and a lot of people really started talking about it maybe 2017 when he won the Australian Open. Once he started winning more slams, and all of a sudden he's beaten Nadal a few times in a row, and he's playing great tennis. So then people started really talking about it. And of course, his backhand is the thing that a lot of people like to comment on. Even on that Zoom call the other day with Edberg and Federer, they were talking about it. And Edberg was saying how, it's giving him easier access to spin because it's a larger head size. Right. Yeah. And being able to come over the ball on the one hander, that's kind of, the thing that I think everybody agrees it's really helped him out with. And you know, I mean, a bigger head size is going to give you more power. So naturally, as you get older, right, you're gonna lose some of that. So going to a bigger head size can help. And hey, some people are too proud to do that, right? But you know, Edberg said it was one of the wisest things that Federer ever did on the call. So that was pretty interesting to hear. So obviously he's had great results, and hopefully this second comeback, you know, he'll keep it going. So
sure. Well, the Pro Staff is obviously the most well-known and historical racket that Wilson has produced. You have two other brands that are really marketplace leaders as well, the Clash and the Blade. We spoke recently, and I've seen photos of college teams, Division I college teams, and the rackets are lined up to be strung, and you know, it's 90% blades. So that's a heck of a racket, as is the Pro Staff. And then you have the Clash brand. Can you tell us a little bit about how the Blade differs from the Pro Staff and the Clash, and kind of vice versa?
Yeah, so the Blade, you're right. It's definitely the number one racket when it comes to college tennis. You know, so many people are using it. The main difference, I would say, is that the Blade is really good for players that like to maybe hang back on the baseline a little more than Pro Staff players typically do. So it's still, you know, a thin beam control frame that, you know, plays well at the net, but it's a little lighter. And so for guys that are in super long rallies and things like that, and that is, you know, how a lot of college tennis is played today, right? These guys are out there grinding super long points, things like that, kind of a clay style of tennis. Blade is going to be a little better for that because it's a little more flexible than the Pro Staff is, so it's going to give you more control. But again, it's lighter, and so it's just going to be a little easier to swing over and over and over again. So, but the Pro Staff, you know, the precision of that racket is really great for people that are spending a lot of time up at the net. So those are maybe the main differences, I'd say.
And what about the Clash?
So the Clash is super exciting because, you know, it's our newest racket franchise, just came out early 2019, and it's actually the number one racket in the world. It was basically number one in the US like 2 weeks after launching, which was crazy for us because we hadn't had a number one tennis racket in more than 15 years. And no pro players are playing with us. You know, we couldn't just say like, you know, this guy's playing with it or this, you know, this woman's playing with it. It was very much having to rely on the playability of the racket. And it's a very different racket with how it was constructed. So, you know, typically when you are designing rackets, you kind of have to design them on the spectrum of power and control, you know, and so if you want to add a little more power to it by making it a thicker beam or a bigger head size or something like that, you know, you're going to have to sacrifice some control and vice versa. But with Clash, the racket, now we can say it actually because a lot of our patents have gone through. And I actually have one sitting right here. Maybe I can demonstrate a little bit, but we're using a new angle for the braid in this racket. And if you just think of like, it's a 45-degree angle. And if you just think of like those finger tracks that you used to like stick your fingers in, and when you pull, you can't get them out, right? So this braid that we use, it basically makes it stable without losing, you know, the flexibility. And so this racket is the most flexible racket ever. It's like a super low RA. That's kind of the measurement they use. It's like low 50s, high 40s even. But we haven't lost the stability of the racket. So when you hit the ball off center, it's not wobbling. So this is as stable as any of the power frames that are out there. So this really is like the best blend of power and control on the market. And one other interesting thing about this frame is the way that it bends. You know, tennis rackets back in the days of Stefan Edberg, people really measured flexibility. I'll just stand upright, kind of like this, how it moves when you are making contact with the ball and it's bending back. Because that's really, everybody has flat swing, right? That's how people play. But now with, you know, Rafa and all these guys that are swinging so vertically, you know, just coming right up on the ball, we thought, what if we made a racket that instead of just focusing on flexibility this way, we focused on the flexibility this way as well. So now when the racket makes contact with the ball, you're coming up, and Clash does a great job of not only bending back, but also down at the same time. So the racket's not fighting the tennis ball, and so it's hanging on the strings even longer than what it would on any other tennis racket. And so what you're getting is this, if you saw the commercials, they were actually real. Everybody's saying, whoa, when they hit with it, because it doesn't feel like any other tennis racket out there. And so we really just focused on getting the racket into as many hands as possible, because we know when people hit with this thing, it's really hard to go back and want to play with the other racket, because all of a sudden it might start to feel like it's broken or something, because you just get a such better feeling with Clash when you make contact and you really feel and control the ball. It's definitely a special racket, and so we're super excited about that. And it's only been out like a year and a half, so we'll see how it goes. It's definitely, players have been, of course we want it on Pro Tour, but it's such a different feeling racket than anything else out there. It takes time. So.
And when you talk about that feel and rackets, it just that that's a racket for you. As a tennis player yourself, and I'm a player myself, and I've hit with a lot of rackets over the years. It's interesting, and I'd love to see if you agree, being an expert in the field. A lot of times I'll walk out there, hit one ball, and I'm like, that just it felt perfect. And then sometimes and sometimes it's the strings and other things, but usually it's the racket. And I read about kind of the pro staff feel, and that's what's been that it's a term that's kind of been synonymous with the pro staff over the years. And it sounds like it is that just, this is the racket for me. And it's and I think all three, the blade is the same way. And then I think it sounds like the Clash is the same thing. You can get a feel for it just right off the bat. So well, there's different levels of players, right? And so we're trying to make the best racket for every type of player. And that can get confusing, right, for people, because there ends up being so many different rackets, and there's different head sizes and weights and various things like that. But ultimately, we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to figure out what is the racket that I should go out and demo. And then hopefully, if they have a couple in mind, they go out, hit with them, and they find the one that fits them. And everybody plays so different, so it really just comes down to trying to figure out how to innovate for all the different levels. So exactly. So while we're playing show and tell, I told you, Patrick, that you'll see that I keep every tennis book, I keep every tennis magazine, I actually keep every tennis racket that I have ever had in my life, and I'm not kidding. So I probably have about 120 frames downstairs, and I had to find my pro staffs so I could show them to you, and maybe you can just tell me exactly what I'm swinging here. So let's start with this baby.
The BLX.
Don't try this at home. I mean, this this is heavy. This is about 12. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Usually they're about 12 ounces unstrung. So I believe it's like 12.6 maybe strung. So, yeah.
So that was obviously a classic. And then I was lucky enough to one of your colleagues sent me one of these babies. This is the
nice.
This is the Laver Cup edition of the. This is
Roger's played with a few different colors at the Laver Cup the last 2 years. He had the red one and the blue one here for Team Europe. But
and you see, I haven't gotten it strung because I just don't really want to play with it. I don't know, maybe
it's pretty lucky racket for sure.
and then here it is. This is the 6.0, and with the and Pete Sampras, you can't see that, but he did sign this, and I was dumb enough to hit with it.
Wow.
Obviously, the signature came off.
The fairway grip and everything. That's the original, huh?
Yeah, and this grip feels huge.
Yeah.
And but again, actually, this one, it's weird. This one feels a little bit lighter. I don't.
Yeah, wonder what grip size it is. I mean, obviously, you know, we were talking on the phone the other day about grip sizes and how everybody used to play with much bigger handles back when, you know, you had those flat swings. So the thicker handles actually kind of felt better. I mean, I used a 4 5/8 when I was in high school. But with more and more topspin and vertical swings, you know, now everybody is kind of going down in grip size, because if you're hitting more of a vertical swing, you're getting a lot more wrist action. And using a thicker grip can actually, you know, kind of hurt your wrist if you're using a lot of spin. I had tendonitis in high school. I think it was definitely from the 5/8. So now I use a quarter. So
yeah, it's interesting you say that, because obviously Rafa Nadal has been using that tiny. I mean, just in their big close-ups, and you're like, how that? And that's why he probably has all the tape on his hands.
Yeah.
And then I remember when Roger was using a larger grip, and he went, I don't know if he's at a 4, probably 3/8.
He's at like a 3/8 now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's an interesting trend. So why don't we, I know you've got one of the new pro staffs with you, so why don't you break out that baby and
yeah. So I've got it right here, the newest pro staff. So we're super excited about this. I mean, if you just think of like all the history behind this racket, it's really cool to see the red and yellow stripes on there again. I've actually got the t-shirt on right here. There it is.
Nice.
Yeah, so we've got some of these, you know, looking at the original that you had there. It's got like the stripes that go all the way around and stuff. So bringing a little bit of heritage back to the racket. And it's actually, might be tough to see here, but it's got
oh yeah,
red and yellow stripes up there as well, with the exposed braid kind of at the tip. You know, to talk about obviously how historic this racket's braid was with the graphite and Kevlar. So yeah, it definitely got some like heritage elements to it, but it's still got this modern black that we've been using, you know, on Roger's racket and the pro staff since 2016, I guess. So kind of a little heritage and modern.
No, it's a beautiful racket, and I'll give you my address if you want to stay in line with some of your colleagues. Now, it's probably some Wilson friends of mine that were before your time, but there's a history of me being sent rackets. So,
all right, we may be able to figure that
out. So, why don't you tell everyone where you can pick this up?
Yeah, so you can, you know, obviously get it at wilson.com, but as of yesterday, it's available for pre-sale with retailers all over the world. And on the 28th, it'll be available for sale. So the 28th is really the first day that you could walk into a store and buy it. But right now, wilson.com, you can get it. They're shipping. And then retailers are taking pre-sale now. So pick your poison, I guess.
Right. Well, Patrick, we appreciate, first of all, you coming on Changeover Chat. And second of all, we appreciate Wilson's support of TennisONE. So,
absolutely.
It's such a beautiful racket. We've gotten comments within, you know, our team at TennisONE looking at the ads, and it's just a beautiful campaign. It's a beautiful racket. So, congrats on this. It's a big time for Wilson for sure.
Yeah, well, definitely appreciate it, Randy. But yeah, we're super excited about it, and hopefully I got construction going on in my apartment here, but yeah, excited to have the new racket out, and excited to have pro tennis back. It's great to see it on court. So,
all right, Patrick, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Appreciate it.